Welcome back to the Book Nook. This time, we're diving deep into this classic all about shaking up your thinking.
Oh,
Roger Van Ooch, a whack on the side of the head. It's full of insights and exercises, designed to break free from those mental ruts and boost your creative mojo.
yeah, it's a book that really stands the test of time, There's a reason it's still so popular.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we're really focusing on the actionable stuff, like things you can actually do to unlock that, creative potential.
I like that approach,
You know?
because it's one thing to read about creativity, but it's another to actually put those ideas into practice.
Exactly. So Von Oost starts off by introducing these 10 soft thinking tools. And he really emphasizes that creativity isn't about, finding that one right answer. It's more about shifting perspectives and challenging assumptions.
Right. It's about expanding your thinking, exploring different avenues and opening yourself up to possibilities you might not have even considered before.
He's got some really interesting tools in here, like the reverse tool. So instead of asking, how do I get more customers? You ask, how do I lose customers? It seems counterintuitive, but what do you think about that approach?
It's brilliant because by focusing on how you might lose customers, you're forced to confront your weaknesses and blind spots, and that can lead to some truly innovative solutions for improving your business.
Okay, I'm seeing how that can be really helpful. And then there's the exaggeration tool, where you just take some aspect of a problem and blow it out of proportion. What if your product was 100 times bigger? Or what if it only lasted for a minute? It seems a little wacky at first.
It does, but that's kind of the point, right? These seemingly ridiculous scenarios can force you to think differently and come up with solutions you wouldn't have thought of. Otherwise, it's about breaking free from those conventional thought patterns.
So it's like by exaggerating the problem, you're actually pushing yourself to be more creative in finding solutions.
Exactly. It's like you're jolting your brain out of its comfort zone and forcing it to come up with something new.
I like that. Now, another tool that caught my eye was the wishing tool. Von Oesch talks about suspending disbelief and imagining anything is possible. So like, I wish I could teleport to meetings. That sounds pretty impossible, right? But what if that leads to solutions involving virtual reality or even better scheduling systems? It's about using that wish as a springboard for innovation.
What's fascinating about this tool is that it encourages you to think beyond the constraints of what's currently possible. And by doing that, you might stumble upon solutions that are actually more practical than you initially thought.
Yeah, it's like you're training your mind to think bigger and bolder.
Exactly. Now, these are just a few of the soft thinking tools that Von Oesch outlines in the book, but what I find really valuable is that they're not just, random gimmicks. They get at something fundamental about how our brains work, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Have you ever found yourself using any of these techniques without even realizing it?
All the time. I think we often tap into these tools intuitively, but by giving them names and consciously applying them, we can become much more deliberate and effective in our creative endeavors.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Von Oesch is also a big advocate for the importance of play. And he doesn't just mean for kids. He really believes it's essential for adults to stay creative, too.
Yeah, I think that's something our society often forgets. Play is often seen as frivolous, something we do when we have spare time. But it's actually a crucial ingredient for innovation and problem solving.
He talks about how our culture tends to put so much emphasis on, serious work, and that can stifle creativity. But you see companies like Google and Pixar actually encouraging playfulness in the workplace, ping pong tables, slides, all that fun stuff. What do you make of that?
Well, they're onto something. It's not just about having fun, although that's certainly a bonus. Play actually has neurological benefits when we engage in playful activities. Our brains release dopamine, which reduces stress and makes us feel good, and that relaxed state of mind is much more conducive to creative thinking.
So it's like when we're relaxed and having fun, our brains are more open to new ideas and connections.
Exactly. Play helps us break free from those rigid thought patterns and tap into our natural creativity. It's about giving ourselves permission to be curious, to experiment, and to embrace the joy of discovery.
So I guess the takeaway here is, if you want to come up with brilliant ideas, you need to make time for play. And that could be anything, trying a new hobby, playing a game, or just doing something silly that makes you laugh. What are some ways you incorporate play into your life?
For me, it's often about spending time in nature, going for a hike, listening to the birds, just being present in the moment. It helps me clear my head and feel more connected to my creative energy.
I love that. It's about finding those activities that help you tap into that sense of playfulness and wonder.
Yeah.
Now, Von Oesch uses these really cool metaphors, the explorer and the artist, to describe the two key phases of the creative process. And I have to say, I'm pretty excited to dig into these.
Me too. They're such evocative metaphors, aren't they?
They really are. Okay, so let's start with Iskit. Explorer Van Oak describes this phase as being all about going out, gathering information, observing the world, and asking what-if questions. It's about being curious, exploring new possibilities, and immersing yourself in new experiences.
It's about opening yourself up to the world and letting it spark your imagination.
Exactly. And then you have the artist. This is where you take all that raw material the explorer has gathered and start shaping it into something new and valuable. It's about experimentation, taking risks, iterating, and not being afraid to make mistakes.
It's about bringing your unique vision to life and crafting something that is both innovative and meaningful.
I love that. So it's like this beautiful dance between exploration and creation. You have the explorer venturing out into the world, gathering inspiration, and then the artist steps in to mold and shape that inspiration into something tangible.
And it's important to remember that these phases aren't always linear. You might go back and forth between them several times during the creative process.
That makes sense. So it's not like you just explore once and then create. It's more fluid than that.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic process, and I think that's what makes it so exciting.
Now think about a recent project you worked on. Can you identify those explorer and artist phases in your own creative process?
Definitely. There's always that initial period of research and exploration where you're gathering information and trying to understand the problem or the opportunity. And then there's that shift where you start to experiment, to play with different ideas, and to gradually shape those ideas into a finished product.
It's fascinating how these concepts can be applied to so many different areas of life, isn't it? Whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to be more creative in your everyday life.
Absolutely. I think these metaphors can be helpful for anyone who wants to understand and harness their creative potential.
Now, even with all the right tools and mindsets, there are still those pesky roadblocks that can get in the way of our creativity.
We all have them. They're like those little voices in our heads that tell us we're not good enough or that our ideas are silly.
Exactly. And Van Oach calls these roadblocks mental locks. They're those limiting beliefs and assumptions that can prevent us from coming up with fresh ideas and solutions.
They're like those invisible barriers that hold us back from reaching our full creative potential.
He identifies quite a few of these mental locks, but let's talk about a few that really resonated with me. First, the right answer lock. It's that tendency to get so fixated on finding the one right way that you completely shut down any exploration of alternative solutions.
It's like we get tunnel vision and can only see one path forward, even if it's not the best path.
And then there's the that's not logical lock. It's when you dismiss an idea simply because it seems illogical at first glance, but sometimes those illogical ideas are the ones that lead to truly groundbreaking innovations, right?
Absolutely. Creativity often requires us to step outside the bounds of logic and embrace the unconventional. If we dismiss everything that doesn't fit into our neat little boxes of logic, we're missing out on a whole world of possibilities.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how these mental locks can really hold us back. And the last one we'll touch on today is the follow the rules lock. It's that tendency to blindly follow rules without questioning their relevance. And while rules can be helpful in some contexts, they can also stifle creativity if we let them dictate every decision we make.
It's about finding that balance between structure and freedom. Rules can provide a framework, but sometimes you need to break free from that framework to come up with something truly innovative.
I think it's so important to be aware of these mental locks and to challenge them when they pop up, because once you know what's holding you back, you can start to break free from those limitations.
And that's where the real magic happens. When you break free from those self-imposed constraints, your creativity can really soar.
Now, of all these mental locks, is there one that resonates most with you personally?
You know, I think I'm most susceptible to the that's not logical lock. I have a very analytical mind, so it's easy for me to get caught up in the logic of things, but I'm learning to embrace those seemingly illogical ideas and to see where they might lead.
That's fantastic. I think we all have our own unique mental locks to contend with, but the important thing is to be aware of them and to actively work on overcoming them. What about you? Do any of these mental locks particularly resonate with you?
Well, I'd say the right answer lock is one I see quite often, even in myself. It's easy to get attached to the first decent solution that comes along.
It's like we get comfortable and stop exploring.
Exactly. And that's when we miss out on those truly innovative breakthroughs. It's a reminder to keep asking questions, to keep searching for those unexpected solutions, even when we think we've already found the answer. Yeah, it's so true. Sometimes the best ideas are, right there in front of us, just waiting for us to shift our perspective a little.
Exactly. And That's something Von Oesch talks about a lot, the importance of looking at things from different angles. He actually calls it ambidextrous thinking, using both your logical, analytical left brain and your intuitive, imaginative right brain.
It's like having a superpower. You can break down a problem with precision, but then also flip the switch and generate those wild outside-the-box ideas.
And the key is finding that balance right, because too much logic and you get stuck in a rut, too much imagination, and you might lose sight of practicality.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
You need both sides working together to stay balanced and move forward.
Now, Von Oesch also emphasizes the importance of challenging the status quo. He argues that we often get so comfortable with the way things are that we just stop questioning them.
And that's a recipe for stagnation. If you want to truly innovate, you need to constantly be looking for new and better ways of doing things.
He uses the example of Swiss watchmakers who were initially dismissive of quartz technology.
Yeah.
They thought it was too simple, too low tech. But of course, quartz watches ended up revolutionizing the industry. Those who clung to the old ways were left behind.
It's a cautionary tale, isn't it? We can't be afraid to embrace new ideas and technologies, even if they challenge our assumptions about how things should be done.
So it's about being open to the possibility that there might be a better way, even if it seems radical or unconventional at first.
Exactly. And Von Oesch points out that one of the biggest obstacles to innovation is fear of failure. If you're not willing to take risks and make mistakes, you'll never create anything truly groundbreaking.
It's like that old saying, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. But it seems like our society is so focused on avoiding mistakes that we end up stifling creativity.
It's true, we're often taught from a young age that failure is something to be ashamed of, but Von Oesch argues that failure is actually an essential part of the creative process.
He uses the example of Thomas Edison, who made thousands of unsuccessful attempts before finally inventing the light bulb.
Imagine if he had given up after the first 100 tries. We wouldn't have electric light as we know it.
It's a good reminder that so-called failures are really just stepping stones on the path to success.
Each failure is an opportunity to learn to adjust your approach and to get closer to your goal. And Von Oesch also talks about the importance of embracing ambiguity. He suggests that the most creative solutions often come from unexpected places.
So it's about being comfortable with not having all the answers right away.
Exactly. It's about being open to exploring different possibilities, even if they seem uncertain or unconventional. He talks about how the structure of benzene, a fundamental building block in organic chemistry, was finally understood after a chemist dreamt of a snake biting its own tail.
Wow, that's an interesting example.
It is, and it highlights the power of our subconscious mind. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to step away from it entirely, to let our minds wander and make those unexpected connections.
He calls that incubation, right?
Yes, it's like giving your mind a break to process information and work on the problem in the background. We've all had those moments where we're struggling with a problem, and then the solution suddenly pops into our heads when we're doing something completely unrelated, like taking a shower or going for a walk.
Yeah, it's like our brains are working on the problem even when we're not consciously thinking about it.
Exactly. And Von Oesch emphasizes that our environment can have a huge impact on our creativity. Our surroundings can either inspire us or stifle us.
That makes sense. I know I'm much more productive when I'm working in a bright, airy space with lots of natural light.
Our environment sends signals to our brains that influence our mood and our ability to think about it. Would you be more likely to come up with fresh ideas in a drab, cluttered cubicle or in a space with inspiring artwork and comfortable furniture?
Definitely the latter. So it sounds like it's worth putting some effort into creating a workspace that supports your creativity.
Absolutely. Even small changes can make a big difference. Bring in some plants, put up some inspiring images, or even just open a window to let in some fresh air.
I'm already feeling more creative just thinking about it now. Von Oesch also talks about the importance of our social environment. He says that the people we surround ourselves with can have a huge impact on our creativity.
Our social environment is just as important as our physical environment. He calls the people who support and inspire us creative catalysts. They're the ones who challenge us, encourage us to take risks, and believe in our ideas, even when we doubt ourselves.
That's so important. I've definitely had people in my life who've been incredibly supportive of my creative endeavors, and then there have been others who, maybe not so much.
Think about the people you spend the most time with. Do they support your creativity, or do they tend to be negative and skeptical? It's a crucial question to ask yourself, because the people we surround ourselves with can either lift us up or drag us down.
It's like they could either fuel our creative fire or extinguish it.
Exactly. Now, another interesting concept von Oak introduces is the idea of looking for the second right answer. He argues that we often get fixated on the first solution that comes to mind, and we miss out on other potentially better solutions.
So instead of just settling for the first good idea, we should keep digging and exploring other possibilities.
Exactly. He encourages us to keep asking what else, even when we think we've already found the answer.
Have you ever been in a brainstorming session where someone throws out an idea and everyone immediately jumps on board?
All the time, it's so easy to do, especially when you're under pressure to come up with a solution quickly.
But Von Oak is saying that we should resist that urge to settle for the first good idea instead. We should challenge ourselves and our teams to come up with at least a few more options before making a decision.
It might feel counterintuitive at first, but I guarantee you'll be surprised by the creative solutions you uncover when you push past that initial sense of satisfaction.
It's about not settling for good enough, but striving for great.
Now, von Oak also talks about the importance of knowing when to stop. He says that sometimes we get so caught up in the creative process that we lose sight of the bigger picture. We can spend hours, days, even weeks tinkering with an idea, trying to make it perfect, but there comes a point when you need to step back and ask yourself, is this really adding value? Or am I just spinning my wheels?
That's like getting lost in the weeds, right? You can get so focused on the details that you lose sight of the overall goal.
Exactly. And it's important to recognize when it's time to move on to the next stage of the process. It's a delicate balance between striving for excellence and knowing when to call it a day. He uses the analogy of a sculptor who knows when to stop chiseling away at a piece of marble. If they keep going, they risk ruining the entire sculpture.
I love that analogy. Sometimes less is more.
And knowing when to stop is a skill that takes practice and discipline, but it's essential for anyone who wants to be truly effective in their creative endeavors.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between pushing yourself to do your best work and knowing when it's time to step back and let it go.
Exactly. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about von Oach's book is that he acknowledges that creativity isn't always a linear process.
Yeah, it's not like following a recipe.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. He encourages us to embrace the messiness and unpredictability of the creative journey. It's about being flexible, adaptable, and willing to experiment.
He uses the metaphor of a jazz musician who improvises on a theme. They don't have a set plan, but they respond to the music as it unfolds.
And that's where the magic happens. It's in those unexpected moments, those deviations from the plan, that the most interesting and innovative music is created.
It's about embracing the unknown and trusting the creative process to lead you where you need to go.
Exactly. And it's so easy to get caught up in our routines and our preconceived notions about how things should be done.
We get stuck in our comfort zones.
Right. But if we want to tap into our creative potential, we need to break free from those constraints. Von Oach encourages us to think like a traveler, to approach each new situation with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
It's like seeing the world with fresh eyes.
Exactly. Travelers are constantly learning, adapting, and making connections, and they're not afraid to get lost along the way. In fact, they often find the most interesting things when they stray from the beaten path.
That's such a great analogy for the creative process. Sometimes the most innovative solutions come from those unexpected detours and diversions.
And it's about being open to new experiences, perspectives, and possibilities. It's so easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles, surrounded by people who think and act just like us.
Yeah, and that can lead to a kind of creative inbreeding, right? We're not exposed to new ideas and ways of thinking.
Exactly. We need to step outside our comfort zones and expose ourselves to different perspectives, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world.
Von Oach talks about the importance of cross-fertilization, bringing ideas from one field into another.
He gives the example of how Velcro was invented after a Swiss engineer noticed how burrs stuck to his dog's fur. It's a classic example of how observing nature can inspire innovation.
Yeah, it's fascinating how those seemingly random connections can lead to breakthroughs.
And sometimes the most creative solutions come from simply combining existing ideas in new ways. It's about seeing connections that others miss.
He calls that synergistic thinking, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. He gives the example of how the printing press was created by combining the technologies of winemaking, papermaking, and coin stamping. It's a fascinating example of how seemingly unrelated fields can intersect to create something truly groundbreaking.
So the key takeaway here is to be on the lookout for those unexpected connections, to be open to exploring how ideas from different fields or disciplines might be combined to create something new and valuable.
Exactly. And von Oach also encourages us to embrace constructive discontent. He says that instead of simply complaining about problems, we should see them as opportunities for improvement.
So it's about channeling our frustration into positive action.
Yes, he uses the example of how Henry Ford was dissatisfied with the horse-drawn carriages of his day. That discontent led him to invent the automobile. It's a powerful reminder that creativity is often born out of a desire to make things better.
It's about seeing the world not as it is, but as it could be, and then taking action to make that vision a reality.
Exactly. So the next time you encounter a problem, don't just grumble about it. Ask yourself, how can I make this better? What can I learn from this? What opportunities does this present? It's about shifting your perspective from problem-focused to solution-oriented.
That's a great reminder. Now, Van Oak also reminds us that creativity is a continuous journey, not a destination.
It's not something you achieve once and then you're done. It's a lifelong pursuit.
And it requires constant effort practice and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone.
He encourages us to embrace the whack on the side of the head, to be open to new ideas and challenges that can shake up our thinking and help us grow.
It's about embracing the discomfort of growth.
You know, it's so easy to get complacent, to settle into our routines and our ways of thinking. But if we want to stay creative, we need to constantly push ourselves, challenge ourselves, and expose ourselves to new experiences.
It's about cultivating a beginner's mind, approaching each new situation with a sense of openness and wonder, like a child who sees the world for the first time.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of creativity. It's a journey of lifelong discovery.
And it's a journey that anyone can embark on. You don't need to be a genius or an artist. You just need to be willing to open your mind, embrace the unknown, and trust the creative process.
And who knows what amazing things you might discover along the way.
Yeah, it really is a journey, isn't it? And I love that idea of approaching things with a beginner's mind. Like,
Yeah.
it's so free. Something else that stood out to me was how Van Oach talks about framing problems, in a way that invites creative solutions, because we can get so stuck in our own narrow definitions of a problem.
Yeah, and that limits our thinking, doesn't it? If we're only looking at a problem from one angle, we're likely to miss out on a whole range of potential solutions.
He encourages us to reframe problems, to look at them from different perspectives and ask ourselves those what-if questions. Do you have any examples of how this might work, in practice?
Well, let's say a company is struggling with declining sales. Instead of just asking, how do we increase sales, they could reframe the problem as, how do we create more value for our customers? By shifting the focus from, sales to value, they open up a whole new set of possibilities.
That's a great example. It's like you're looking at the problem through a different lens.
And sometimes the most creative solutions come from simply changing the language we use to describe a problem. The words we choose can shape our thinking in powerful ways.
He also talks about the importance of breaking problems down into smaller, more manageable chunks. It's easy to get overwhelmed by a big, complex problem, and that can lead to feeling stuck.
It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? So by breaking a problem down into smaller pieces, you make it seem less daunting and more approachable.
And each small step forward builds momentum and confidence.
Exactly. You start to see progress, and that motivates you to keep going. Now, another tool that Van Oach highlights is the power of analogy. He argues that analogies can help us see problems in a new light and spark creative solutions.
Oh, I love using analogies. It's like they can unlock a whole new way of thinking about something.
They can be incredibly helpful for bridging the gap between the familiar and the unknown. Van Oach gives the example of how the structure of the atom was initially understood by analogy to the solar system by comparing something complex and abstract to something more familiar, and concrete scientists were able to make sense of it.
That's brilliant. So what analogies could our listeners use to reframe problems they're facing?
Well, it depends on the problem, of course, but a good starting point is to think about other areas of life where you've faced similar challenges, or to look to nature for inspiration. Nature is full of incredible examples of problem solving and adaptation. There's a wealth of knowledge and inspiration to be found there.
And one of the most important takeaways from the book, I think, is that creativity is a skill that can be learned and developed. It's not something you're either born with or you're not.
Exactly. It's like playing the piano or learning a new language. It takes practice, persistence, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. And the more you practice, the better you'll become.
Van Oach provides a ton of exercises and techniques that people can use to hone their creative skills.
It's like a workout for your brain. And the great thing is that these exercises are actually fun and engaging. They don't feel like work.
So if you're really serious about boosting your creativity, I think the key takeaway here is to make a commitment to practicing these techniques regularly. Even setting aside a few minutes each day can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And remember, creativity isn't just about coming up with new ideas. It's also about bringing those ideas to life. It's about
Yeah.
taking action.
Vanoch encourages us to be idea champions, to advocate for our ideas and find ways to make them a reality.
It's about having the courage to share your ideas with the world, even if they're unconventional or risky. And it's about being persistent, about finding ways to overcome obstacles and bring your vision to life.
Because the world needs more creative thinkers, more innovators, more people who are willing to challenge the status quo and make things better.
Absolutely. And a whack on the side of the head is a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to embark on that journey.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive into a whack on the side of the head. But as you said earlier, this is really just the beginning. Now that you're armed with all these incredible tools and insights, it's time to go out and put them into practice. Go make something amazing.